Welcome, Jordan.
Hey, Hector. How you doing?
Good. I'm going to send the invites out one more time just so it shows up at the top of their email boxes. So,
Sounds great. Thank you.
okay.
Hello, Hector. Can you hear me? Sound check.
Hi, Mayor.
Oh, hi, Jordan. Are you on Hector's? I see Hector's name.
Hi, Mayor.
Oh, no,
I'm here.
Hector's
Oh,
here too. I'm
The
just the
gang's all
louder.
here. All right. Well, I'm going to go silent until everybody's here. I have to do this on my phone today, so.
Hey, Counselor Palmer.
Hey Jordan, how you doing?
I'm good. I just took the dog for a walk, so now I'm like exuding heat. But aside from that, good.
Well, it's nice to see you back.
I hope you're back as well. Back at home.
Yeah, I'm at home. I still have this cough. So I think it's not like bad germ-wise. It's just asthma related. So it's just it's lingering and annoying.
Okay, does anybody know if Councilor Byers confirmed that she got the time change?
She was on the email. We sent an email right after. So if she's checking, if she checked her council email since Friday, she would have seen it. Do you want me to text her right now?
Sorry, it takes me a second to unmute on this. Yeah, I'm texting her as well.
Well, then I won't. Thanks.
Hi, Lynn.
All right, I just left her a message. An option, if she doesn't, is if she's not able to make it, would be for us to just hang tight until Member Pestizo can join us. He said he would be coming in late, and then we could just ask him to jump on the group.
Well, I think we have quorum. We could
Oh, that's
conduct
right. we have
business.
quorum.
Yeah, because we have 3. It's a 3-member committee.
Right, right. That's right. Okay. Well, let's give her another minute and
Yeah,
thank you, Member.
sure. I mean, I love having Dave on these though. So I
Yeah.
wasn't sure if that's where you were at, but yeah, I think it's good for us to use the time.
Sounds good. So I'll give her a couple minutes. And then in either case, Member Pestizo will be joining us just a little bit late. Looks like we have Member Clark listening in. That's fantastic. I'll give him one more minute and then I'll go ahead and start the meeting. All right, well, why don't we go ahead and call this meeting to order of the special subcommittee meeting for the Talent Urban Renewal Agency. It is 2:05. Roll call, please.
Counselor Pestizo is not present. Counselor Byers, not present. I'm sorry, Board Member Nemiroff
Here.
and Chair Ayers Flood.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. All right, with that, I'll just go ahead and we'll get started with the staff report. Staff?
Perfect. Hello, TURA Subcommittee. We are here for another session of reviewing the Urban Renewal Plan to make any recommendations, refinements to bring to the larger board. For today's session, I believe Elaine has prepared some things. Elaine, you can nod or shake your head as I get this right or not. Some more topics around affordable housing, economic development, and then we're also going to add to the mixed hazard mitigation today as well. I would also love to share just some thoughts and ideas from over the weekend to propose to the subcommittee to see if something to elevate to the board as well. So with that, I will hand the baton off to Elaine.
Great. And I think maybe before, mine is more looking at projects spread across time. And I think we were hoping we might be able to get some more commercial input over the weekend. And I don't know whether that was able to happen or not. So Chair Ayers Flood, do you know if anything happened there or?
I have not been able to reach any additional property owners. I have the calls out and I'm waiting for the return calls. So basically the information that we have on from the last meeting is where we're at so far.
Okay.
But in a nutshell, what we are finding is the same sort of input that we're getting from on the housing side, which is that insurance policies were not adequate. And then on top of that, inflation on building costs. And then what further widens the gap. So basically, development is being slowed down by an ability to, financial ability. So the third thing that's widening the gap is the differences between the older buildings that were insured at value along, especially along the 99, and where there were older buildings, and the cost of building to current code has further widened the gap of rebuild. So it is a financial hardship, and it is for those reasons, and that's what I've gathered so far.
Okay. Jordan, would you like to share? You sent through an email this morning on hazardous tree removal, Wagner Creek hazard mitigation, and Rapp Road railroad crossing, because then once you share that information, I'll open up the spreadsheet and just show how I've put in some costs for the first 10 years.
Yeah, and I want to apologize to all folks here today, since this is a faster timeline than we're used to, that it's not going to be a very professional looking report that I pull up on screen for you all, but it has all the same information that would be in a professional report. Let me pop that out and zoom in 1 second. So one of the priorities that the board had provided to the subcommittee as cost to estimates was around hazard mitigation and climate stability or climate sustainability. And so I pulled the numbers, and let me do a quick screen share. Can you all see the estimates on the screen? Perfect. So the main, there's the main hazards that talent faces are flooding, earthquake, landslides, and wildfire. For this specific urban renewal district, the main concerns really for that geographical landscape are going to be the wildfire and the flooding. They're not in a landslide zone, and admittedly an earthquake is going to impact us all. So I should add earthquake to that list. But the things that I had numbers for to share with you all fell into the wildfire and the flooding zones. So that is what I'm presenting here to you all. Hazards that we currently are facing as the city is on tree removal. We still have many burnt trees on properties. We are getting at least one phone call a day out of concern about burnt trees within public right-of-ways. And it is, about $1,000 per tree when all is said and done to remove a hazardous tree. So one potential hazard mitigation project is the hazardous tree removal. Another one is the hazardous fuels removal. Now, a trick with both the tree removal and the hazardous fuel removal is it's in a gray area if it's permissible or not using urban renewal funds. It is permissible to do a capital project, and if clearing up land to be able to do that capital project is necessary, it can be part of a larger project. So I just kind of broke out the cost of installing the Wagner Creek walking path. So the hazard that really runs along Wagner Creek is twofold. One is wildfire, because it is very densely filled with debris, burnable debris. And then two, flooding. That is, it is a waterway through the heart of our town. And so the process, and this is what we have applied for grants for, is to remove the hazardous fuels along Wagner Creek and replant it with native plants. Native plants particularly help with flooding issues as well as bring down the fire resistance. And I want to thank Member Clark and Eugene from the Freshwater Trust who helped come up with these numbers. So the estimate is it costs about $8,800 per acre to remove hazardous fuels and replant with native plants. Estimating that the entire length of Wagner Creek is about 11 acres worth of land. And these are all estimates. So that would be what's necessary to really clear that wildfire risk from Wagner Creek. Now, if it needs to be connected to a capital project to be able to be used for urban renewal funds, it would be the Wagner Creek Connection Walking Path, which is a concept that was adopted by the city. You know, off the top of my head, I don't know, but in the last decade, if not more recently, and is a 1.5 mile path along Wagner Creek connects to Bear Creek. You know, I estimate that about 3/4 of that path falls within the urban renewal area as it's been drawn. And 800 of that 3/4 has already been built. And that's in the Old Bridge Village, that part along Wagner Creek. And so my estimates are coming from the Parks Master Plan. And this is where this gets into the magic of budgeting here. Parks Master Plan estimates about 800 feet for a pathway is about $64,000. As we've been implementing the Parks Master Plan, including the Creekside Park play structure and the Cameron Springs Park restroom, the estimates in that master plan are about half the size they need to be to actually complete the project. And so I have doubled the cost for those 800 feet and then extrapolated that across the entire area, urban renewal area, to come up with a total of 835,000. So my best guess for the moment, to clear up Wagner Creek, to install a beautiful walking path to connect our two waterways, would be around $1 million. And then, you know, just to throw in a long term, I also just did some estimates around how much it costs to do a railroad crossing improvement, since I know that Rapp Road is a connection to a lot of developable land west of the railroad tracks. So this is just not to do with hazardous fuel removal. And so those are the numbers that I was able to prepare for today, with best guesses that I have in the moment.
I think, Chair, you're back in control of the meeting for a minute until I bring up this spreadsheet.
Okay, are there any questions? And again, I'm on my phone. Member Panamarev?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, this is really great work, Jordan. And as far as the Wagner path, I wanted to ask, so that's going to go all the way down to the Greenway, right, down to Bear Creek. But the other direction, what would be the terminus that you were estimating? Was that Old Bridge or further along? Oh, you're muted, Jordan, if you're talking.
Yeah, let me change my screen share really quick, and I can actually Parks Master Plan up.
Because I think it's also in the may also be in the transportation plan. I remember looking at that, and I think the original plan goes, gosh, back decades, and it seemed to indicate it would like go all the way towards the schools, or and then you have the railroad crossing above, so it's kind of like not sure how that would work. So I was just trying to get a visual, but I think this has been in parks, as well as maybe I think also transportation. I'm not positive about that.
Great, and I did not have time to dive into the transportation plan.
There's not much.
Okay.
There's not much.
The plan from the park side. So this is a visual of what the plan is, to have the walking path all the way along. I'm not sure if the plan did not look at the feasibility of this. This section of the plan has been built. This is the phase 1 part. I think it was phase A is how it's referred to in the master plan of what they recommend building first. So it's from Rapp Road. And the idea is to have it reach all the way down to that Suncrest Park area. And there's one more visual for it. That's a little easier to see. Apologies for the dizziness here. And so that brings up a great point of, you know, these are estimates based off the quick info we have. It would be much cheaper. Although would we still be able to remove all the hazardous fuels along time? There we go. The dream was to have a walking path all the way along.
Yeah.
Feasibility still to be determined.
And that's a beautiful dream. I think the only part that I was wondering, that I was scratching my head over is like where it goes under the railroad track and how that might be accomplished. It didn't seem like there's a lot of room. But I believe, and maybe Councillor Clark is going to agree with me or help me with the memory. I think we put that in the urban renewal area, Wagner Creek, for that very reason, because we knew about that walking path, and we thought that would be a great thing for urban renewal to and have the opportunity to undertake. But that's a great picture. So, but sorry, just to clarify, the estimate that you did was for the entire.
Well, here's the math behind it. Is I estimated how much it would be for this section, and then extrapolated that for the remainder of the pathway that's within the urban renewal area.
Okay. But if your extrapolation is correct, the whole thing.
Whole thing, but
Okay.
not accounting for major things like a railroad tunnel or railroad bridge.
Okay,
Not
great.
included.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Member Clark?
Yeah, I think most of that corridor is not publicly owned, with the exception of the park up at the upper end and then the stretch through adjacent to Old Bridge. Wouldn't we have to acquire right-of-ways from property owners in order to make this work?
I'm assuming yes. I'm also assuming, given the number of phone calls that we're getting from folks who are concerned about Wagner Creek, that folks would be looking forward to have that be a cleaned up area.
Yeah, I mean, certainly. When you talk about putting a public access trail across the back edge of someone's property, they might say, well, I mean, some people might resist it, and other people might say, well, if I'm giving something up, to allow for that right of way, then maybe there should be some compensation for that. It seems like that would be reasonable to anticipate some expense on that, and I'm not sure how one would begin to quantify, but that's just a thought I had.
Yeah, that's a very on point thought.
All right, any other member Ponomarev?
Yeah, just one more question. I'm trying to remember, is this a walking path or a biking and walking path?
In the parks master plan, it is only referred to as a trail.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
just thinking about in terms of potential funding for it, because I'm sure there are that we could get help, that TURA probably wouldn't have to shoulder that alone from the various transportation grants that are out there.
Yeah, if I could just chime in, from a practicality standpoint, I think given the narrow corridor and kind of negotiating some of the slopes that are going to be in there, I think a narrower walking only path is more practical than a bikeable path.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Member Clark.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, back to staff.
I am going to share the TIF workbook. Do you see it? This big spreadsheet?
We do now, it's loaded.
Okay. The way Tiberius Solution builds their spreadsheets is that we can put assumptions of today's dollars costs in a spreadsheet, and then up above in the actual projects fund, it will convert today's dollar costs to year of expenditure costs. So inflate 2022 dollars in the first place to 2024 dollars. And each year as we go out, it inflates some by an additional 3%. So in the last meeting, I think I told you that we we're expecting that in the first year, you could place about a $6.1 million bond, and with other funding that you have about $6.2 million worth of available funding to allocate in your first year. So this is just playing with the worksheet. This isn't anything set in stone. This is me trying to see, okay, for a 10-year period, given what we've talked about as priorities, how might money be allocated? So I put housing solutions and hazard mitigation and commercial solutions first, because those are the three things we talked about. So if we have approximately $6 million in the first year, I allocated 3.9 million of that to housing. If we looked at the spreadsheet that I gave you, or we talked about in the last meeting, that is equal to about 100 units of multifamily housing. And then I took hazard mitigation, the amounts that Jordan put in her spreadsheet totaled to about $1 million. And that includes just the tree removal, which we don't know for sure is an eligible urban renewal cost, but also the Wagner Creek restoration for $1 million. So I put that out over a 5-year, like actually 6-year period to get to that $1 million. That, again, if you were able to get any grants to help, then that 500,000 allocated initially might be enough or not. And that amount can change by either reducing the housing amount or reducing commercial solutions amount. But in the first year, I allocated commercial solutions 1.2 million. And then I think you probably need to do some planning, potentially like updating your housing needs analysis to know just what available land you really have and what kind of units you can put on those. So just allocated some planning there. The 114,000 is finance fees for the bond. And then administration, if you're going to be administering, I just put $100,000 in there. That was just a guess on my part of if you were going to be having somebody paid for doing administration of TURA or paying part of the city salaries for doing TURA. So again, that amount can be changed. That was just a trying to give you something to look at. So this funds those first 3 top projects at these amounts in the first year. And then as you go out, you really don't have any substantial amount of money to fund more housing until fiscal year in 2029, when there's another bond sale. But you have other amounts that you can fund for either hazard mitigation. This is the railroad crossing. If you want to try to start saving money so that you can unlock that development, the area on the other side there for development. And again, this could be moved up in time if you took money out of housing or out of commercial solutions. So that I just wanted to give you something to react to. I put this together for these numbers are over a 10-year time period, showing that you still have to allocate over the next 20 years, another $20.6 million, but that the allocations end up looking something like this, where every few years you have a bond sale so you can allocate larger amounts of money. And then if you spend all of that money in those time, that year that you can allocate it, your funding in the next couple of years, is still a couple $100,000, but it's not those big amounts that we can allocate to housing. I think I have 3 of these allocated to housing, larger amounts over time. So the other step in finishing up this document for presentation to the agency on Thursday is looking at percentage allocations over time, kind of looking at this and saying, I really think we ought to allocate more here or more there, or less here or less there. We'd really like housing overall to be X% of the total. We'd like commercial solutions to be X% of the total, so that I can fill out a full spreadsheet for review and approval. Sure.
Member Penamara, and then Jordan.
So I just have a couple of questions that I think you've already told us the answer to, but I just want to make sure I get it right. As far as these allocations, they are adjustable over time,
Yes.
correct?
Yeah.
So if we guess wrong, you know, we can make those adjustments as we go. So that's good. The other question I had is, you mentioned housing needs analysis.
Mhm.
How does that work with this? So if it's a city, could it be a citywide housing needs analysis with the city chipping in something? I mean, how would that work as far as putting some costs on the city?
I assume it would be just updating the former needs analysis that was done prior to the fire, and updating it, but I'm sure Jordan would have thoughts on that too. And I don't know how much a housing needs analysis costs to update or to identify, but I do know that the information that was provided, the picture has changed, so it doesn't provide the full information.
And I'd like to just jump in on that topic. If that's okay, Member Penamara. The city has grant funding for housing needs analysis and a buildable lands inventory, and we are currently working with Nikki to see if that fits into her scope of contract to get that going. So we expect as a city to have a housing needs analysis within a year.
So that money could be allocated elsewhere, Jordan?
It could be, and actually that's the comment that I wanted to share, is just adding some data, is that this current year, TURA spent about $215,000 on administration. So I do think that estimate
Is
is
low.
low.
So what, do you think that 215 is an accurate number?
I know that is what TURA spent this past year. Whether that same level of administration is needed going forward, I would leave that to the board to estimate.
So just responding to that, I would assume that Elaine, you're a great deal, but you know, there were a lot more hours in this last year putting in all this analysis together. Feels like there's a lot of this was a really busy year for us. So I'm wondering, you know, moving forward, I don't expect it to be that intense in terms of consultant help.
I did not include Elaine's cost in that estimate.
Oh, okay. All right. So that was just administrative costs. Okay, good to know.
Well, I would say though that with planning, I mean, when we say that we don't expect our consultant costs to be as high, that might be true, but I do think that, you know, we need to be mindful of how much planning there is to do moving forward. So, but it sounds to me like it's reasonably covered, so. All right, any other questions or comments?
So may I ask specific questions, or do people want to start giving me specific input on the model I've done so far?
Well, let's see, let's start with, if there's any specific comments. If none, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Elaine to ask questions. Elaine?
So looking at this, Housing Solutions gets the majority of funding. So hazard mitigation is 1 million, commercial solutions is 2 million. Housing Solutions is nearly 11 million. Do you want that evened out in the future, or do you still want, is Housing Solutions 70% of your total budget or not? So how do you think you want that allocated? Well, we've got 10 years here, but for then the next 20 years.
Any comments? Member Penamara?
So if the question is for the next 20 years, so the first 10 years, you said you had about 60% towards housing? Is that right, Elaine?
Yeah, it may be.
I'm not seeing
Yeah.
percentages here, so.
I don't have percentages on there. I was just looking at the numbers trying to guess.
Mhm.
So if I took that 20 million out, that becomes 18 million, and there's 10 million. So I'll do that real quick. So right now it's about a little over 60%.
Yeah, I think that that does sound good to me. I feel like the just talking about the number of structures involved, housing is a lot bigger than commercial. I think I would, I would imagine, I think I would think that housing across the board should be greater than half. That's just my my feel for it, and I could go up higher. 60% sounds good to me. I could even see 70%, except for I think that the hazard mitigation, especially with the Wagner Creek risks right in our town, I kind of want to prioritize that a little bit more. Although the businesses do need help as well. As far as what could wait and what couldn't wait, you kind of thinking about what opportunities kind of diminish as time goes on.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of really want to see Wagner Creek cleaned up as soon as possible, but maybe there will be some additional funding that we can find for that and then shift. So yeah, I would. So that's where I'm at. I think maybe shift a little bit more towards the hazard mitigation, just to try to move the schedule up on that, with the understanding that that could change.
Mm-hmm.
Member Clark?
Yeah, forgive me if I missed this. What is included in other projects?
Well, other projects right now is not allocated to anything. So in our plan, and I've been spending time this morning going through the plan and combining categories like we talked about in the last one, so that climate change and hazard mitigation and emergency preparedness are all within one category. And then we had transportation, and we had a category for kind of, it was a catch-all category, I think, from John, but everything else looked like it went into categories except for arts. So I think in terms of what I don't have down here is is arts. And that is something that you all talked about, but everything else fits within these other categories.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? So I remember the other night we were talking about compressing, there's like 7 or 8 categories and we were trying to compress them into like the top 3 priorities. Am I understanding you correctly that we've been able to take all of the different categories that we originally had, which was 7 or 8, and compress them into the top priorities, except for arts?
Let me pull over what I've been working on this morning.
And the follow-up question to that is going to be, I want to talk a little bit about infrastructure in terms of like water infrastructure and what category that's falling in, because those are big dollars. And I just want to make sure that if it's falling under the hazard mitigation, which is where I think it should go, if we're adequately considering some of our water infrastructure as part of that cost.
We have not allocated a number to water infrastructure, but infrastructure was the other category. So right now, in terms of projects, we have affordable housing, attainable housing, and economic development. Why this did that?
And these are really just the general allowed expenses, correct? The allowed programs.
Right, and can you see, I put the plan over here. Can you see it now? Are you looking at it?
No, it's still the spreadsheet. I think you have to stop. You're probably sharing a specific
Yeah,
document.
okay, I need to stop share and share again. Okay, can you see this now?
Yes.
I do not know why. Every time I'm clicking, it's screwing things up. Not have that in it. So the first project is affordable housing, attainable housing, and underneath that, and I can take this off if this is being covered by the city. So update the housing needs analysis. And then as informed by the HNA update, facilitate the development of new housing stock, providing incentives such as land acquisition and or assembly system development charge payments or other incentives to make the project financially feasible, work with nonprofits for the development of attainable housing, facilitate the development of more affordable housing types like duplexes and triplexes, acquire land for future housing development. And this one, I didn't know for sure what it means. Now that I'm looking at it from John, develop a purchase program for manufactured modular homes. And I don't know if that was trying to make home ownership, if that was the intent of that. And then to facilitate increased home ownership of all housing types. So that's what I have as the types of activities under housing. And then economic development, business recruitment, identify the needs of the business community for developing within the area. So to me, that's a planning project that we know a little bit. We don't know that much about what needs or can be done. And then to provide funding to assist the businesses to grow, prosper, and recover. Develop incubator hubs. That was one thing that you all talked about. Recruit new businesses. Provide capacity support for workforce training, support diversity, equity, and inclusion in business assistance, provide funding to help purchase properties that require consolidation or redevelopment, furthering other city or plan goals and objectives. So these are all things that you had identified with John that he asked to be put in the plan. And then I grouped sustainability, hazard mitigation, drought tolerant solutions, urban forestry, and emergency preparedness together, put as number one, provide Wagner Creek improvements. And then you had talked about install emergency resiliency satellite hubs, promote disaster preparedness, provide signage, wayfinding, routing, implement gray water solution in parks and public spaces, implement sustainable drought resistant landscaping in parks and open spaces, develop hazard mitigation programs along greenways, install streetscape enhancement along business corridors, provide assistance for planting trees, provide evacuation routes and infrastructure to support emergency preparedness. So then we have transportation connectivity. So address transportation challenges to allow for future development. That would be like the railroad crossing. Improve walkability to schools, improve connections to Highway 99 corridor and Greenway, enhance bike and pedestrian routes. And I just have costs there because I don't know. I mean, a lot of these I don't know costs for each individual area, but on some of these there might be costs, like in a TSP or something. And then John had kind of a catch-all category that we've moved almost everything up except for arts, and this one that I have highlighted, which is focus on enhancing infrastructure that includes, but is not limited to, broadband, water services, sewer, street improvements, sidewalks, and landscaping for property owners within the area. So that particular one could be another whole area under infrastructure. A lot of times we do that, or it could be transportation and infrastructure, because transportation's you could have an infrastructure category that transportation and this other one is in. So that was one of my questions, was how do you want, this is the only one I have not found figured out where exactly it goes. And I don't know costs for that. I don't know what, if there are water and sewer programs in the CIP that you want identified, or how to allocate there.
And I can share some allocation thoughts on that one, just for the subcommittee here. So the city is currently going through a capital project planning process. I think we've identified capital projects that are within the urban renewal area, but we do not have any costs associated. That would be the next phase of the process.
So I would just say, I mean, everything's a forecast, right? That's what forecasts are our best estimate of what we're going to need. And that's why forecasts can be adjusted along the way. But I just want to be mindful of where that cost is going to be, and just to make sure that we are considering it, and that it's at, that we have adequate funds to be able to work out those plans as we move forward. Member Panamarev?
Yeah, as far as where to put that, do people ever say like category transportation and infrastructure?
Sure.
I see some overlap. I also see, so many of these things, and I keep saying this, are supported by ODOT programs or other programs. And I also am thinking that some of these infrastructure ideas will become apparent in conjunction with new housing development, especially in the vacant areas. So I'm also mindful of, the new climate friendly areas, approach to placemaking in community downtowns and all of that. So I think that, there's going to be a lot of new variables coming into play that may be part of larger projects or smaller projects. I mean, even going so far as to think about the grants that we have as far as solar the studies we're doing regarding solar storage, potentially solar renewable energy sources. So I think it's okay to kind of have, as the mayor said, just kind of a general item there. And as far as forecasting, I think that, you know, understanding that numbers can change over time, we can put some good guesses in there.
A lot of times I also put in language that says, like, if we look at this sustainability, add something that says this could include the following, could include, but it's not limited to the following programs. So, you know, and at the very beginning, put in language that says we know some things, but we also know we don't know everything, and we don't know everything over a 30-year time frame. So as the plan allows for new projects to be identified in the future, they could be added to the list through a minor amendment. And that works if you're able then to develop or put in budgets, you know, kind of by category. But if you're putting in budgets specifically for items, then if you add something, you're going to have to remove something because you have limited budgets. But and some of this I think will be informed by advice on how specific we have to be on tying budgets to specific items or to general descriptions.
Mike, I have a comment on that. I think it's really important that we try to create as much flexibility in the program as allowed. And it takes me back to a comment you made, Elaine, a few days ago. I mean, somewhere in the beginning of this subcommittee process where you said you were talking about $6 million being part of the initial bond being pulled, and how that's virtually unheard of. And I would imagine that we're one of a few, if there's any other countable, you know, Oregon cities that have utilized this tool for a catastrophe of this size and of this nature. And so in many ways, when we talk about, you know, like $6 million so early in the process being unheard of, so much of what we're doing is learning as we go, because not a lot of cities have used urban renewal agencies, I would imagine, to recover from this kind of catastrophe. Not a lot of cities have had to recover from this level of a catastrophe. So my point being that as we've talked about this, there's been signals along the way that remind us all that this tool is provided for a fire recovery that hasn't been utilized in this way typically. And I mean that literally, typically it's not utilized this way. So we need to create flexibility for ourselves as the conditions change. I hope that made sense.
It does. I have spent some time also providing more information about that in the document so that it's part of the record, and citing the executive order that established it as a disaster area, and so that information is made clear in the two documents. Although we all know it's clear, it becomes more clear as part of the overall read of the documents.
That's great. And I just want to make one more comment about the housing percentages. I would echo what member Penamariff said about the higher percentage for housing. I mean, no matter what the fire, you know, what echoes always in my mind in this conversation is that, you know, we have such a housing deficit that we're never going to get caught up. And if we look at what is Talent's, you know, share of that, I mean, I think it goes way beyond what we actually lost. And even that proposition of trying to recover what we lost, I think is kind of a daunting task. And so, yeah, I almost feel like, if it were up to me, I would make it the highest possible percentage, but I'd certainly support my colleagues in what they've said so far. And then I see Member Panama's hand up, so I'll go ahead and hand it over to her at this moment.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to touch on two things. One, I see Councilor Pastizzo has joined us, Member Pastizzo, and give him the opportunity to say how much he's heard, and we can catch him up. But also, Elaine, I think I heard you say earlier Thursday, and I thought it was Wednesday that we were going to have the plan to consider in front of TURA. I just want to make sure I got that day right.
Oh, it could be, and I could have just misspoken. Let me go to my calendar. All these days are running together very quickly. Let's see, let's go backwards. It's the 29th, right? Which is Wednesday.
Okay.
And that's important if anyone else is listening, that I don't mislead them.
Yeah, and it's important that you're there Wednesday. So, and also I just want to say hi to Member Pastizzo and give him the chance to say where he came in and catch him, so you can catch him up, Elaine.
Yeah, well, I just came in while Darby was talking.
Just now.
Yeah. And, I don't want to derail the meeting, but, just a quick synopsis would be helpful.
Elaine, do you want to?
Sure. So we started out by summarizing, we don't have further information on commercial needs than what we had, and you were at the meeting last Friday. We have a bunch of calls out, but not returned. And Jordan was able to provide some information which we can send on to you about costs for hazard mitigation and Wagner Creek improvements, so that we could look at those costs and see how and when to plug them into allocation to projects over time. And that those costs were approximately $1 million. And I brought up this spreadsheet then to show that I had, just for the purposes of facilitating discussion, put in some dollars over time for the first 10 years of the program, knowing that, we still have $20.6 million to allocate over the next 20 years. And was just trying to get some input on how the allocations felt, and whether priorities needed to change or whether costs needed to change. So some input from Jordan was that the actual administration cost for this year for TURA has been closer to $215,000. So I'll need direction from the quorum here at some point to tell me to what number you want me to put in there. And then also receive direction that the hazard mitigation really maybe ought to be done as soon as we have money. So that instead of putting the 500,000 there, which indeed may end up being enough if you can get grants elsewhere, but we don't know for sure that those are available, that we put $1 million there and take it from some other category, knowing that if indeed you're able to get other funding sources, you could reallocate back to the other categories. So basically and then what I was just doing was going through the different projects, trying to show how I had regrouped them from the information that I had received before from John into a little bit different types of categories, which basically respond to housing solutions, hazard mitigation, which is a big category of hazard mitigation, emergency preparedness, climate change. So maybe that whole category is really called sustainability. Commercial solutions, transportation/utilities, and then community, identity, arts, and then this arts would not go there, but the community identity, I think, includes what Member Panamaroff was saying, which is creating that civic identity, city identity that people want to be in and live by and recreate and provide their business to. So so far we've allocated in the first 10 years not much to that, but of course this was just looking at the needs, knowing that I needed to get together $1 million for hazard mitigation, and I allocated as much as possible to housing. Really, at the points that we had big bond sales, I have made large allocations to housing, and knowing that any of this can be changed upon your input and direction.
Okay, thank you. I noticed that based on recent trends, your inflation rate seems modest, and I'm just wondering how that may or may not impact.
That's a great
plans.
question, and Nick and I have been contemplating that. Our inflation is based on over time, and this is a 30-year plan. And historically, over time, 3% has been solid. We have had one city that has asked us just in the near term to increase that amount to 5% for the initial 5 years, and then go back to 3%. So we can change that on your direction. We know that in the short term it's much higher than 3%.
So how would that actually impact these numbers, roughly?
Well, it impacts what these numbers turn into up here. So this is in today's number, and where it transfers into the actual spreadsheet, it gets inflated over time. So these numbers will change, and what that really means is you end up having less capacity over time for spending your dollars than what we initially had forecasted. So it will reduce really this line, which is the amount of money per dollars in today's dollars, because as it increases, we still have to hit that cutoff of what maximum indebtedness is. So as each dollar increases over time, we hit that cutoff earlier, and the amount of money we have in today's dollars will end up going down.
Okay, thanks.
But we can do that if directed. Yeah, and the time to make that direction is now, not Wednesday.
And I will share, just to help put some data to this conversation, kind of regionally, what municipalities are seeing is about a 7% increase in overall expenses every year.
For how long, Jordan?
I want to say for the last handful of years.
Okay.
So increasing over the short term might be a more accurate picture. But I will also share that's total expense increase, not just inflation.
If you make a decision to increase, that impacts your numbers here. It doesn't impact your overall maximum indebtedness. That remains the same. So if inflation turns out indeed to get under control and be lower, what it just means is you have more money to allocate to projects. So that's a good thing. If you make projections that don't show enough inflation, what it means is you've maybe promised more than you're really able to deliver. So if you want to under promise and over deliver, you would increase that inflation rate a little bit. If you want to leave it the same, there is a chance that over a 30-year time period, this will be too conservative and you won't be able to deliver all the amount of funding that you've promised.
Any comments from the board about that, from the subcommittee? Member Panamarev?
Yeah, but it sounded like we could just do it for the, like, say, the next 3 years, the higher amount. Yeah, I think Councilor Pestizo's suggestion makes a lot of sense and I'm supportive. Go ahead, Dave, if you want to say exactly what you're thinking.
Well, I would tend to under promise and over deliver would be my inclination. So, you know, and I don't know about everyone else, but the future seems pretty darn unpredictable right now. And I could see there's potential drivers that could keep inflation high for a little while here. Hopefully not, but who knows the way decisions get made that affect that sort of thing. So I think raising it up to at least 5% would, it's sort of like hedging our bets a little bit for like the first 3 to 5 years.
I concur.
As do I.
Jordan, what is the city using for the city's budget?
In terms of what our projected cost increases will be.
Yeah,
You know, we did it based off different categories.
okay,
Construction, we're seeing a 10 to 15% increase.
Yeah.
We did do I think we ended up doing a 30 to 40% increase because we were using 2 years ago numbers. So we're definitely on the higher end. We're much higher than 5%. I think our estimate is close to that 7% overall.
and if the 7% is what really has been happening, would it be better to use the 7% for 3 to 5 years? Or the 5%? And I just need to be directed by somebody to have this change to whichever one you want.
I will say predictions for inflation rate are to fall that the government is taking actions to try to lower that inflation rate. Though Member Pestizo, has a better analysis than I do on what the likelihood of that occurring is.
It seems like, I'm sorry, I'm not an expert on this, but from what I can tell, it seems like they're using sort of outdated and sort of potentially catastrophic methods to control inflation. There's more tools in the toolbox, is my understanding, and they're not seemingly using them. So I would have no problem putting it 7 because I can't see, and maybe someone needs to point this out to me. I can't see how, at the end of the day, right, if the inflation isn't as high, we end up with a little more money down the road than we thought we would have.
Right.
Which is good. I guess the downside is we would be budgeting for less in the near term, which is really where we want to spend a lot. So, as soon as we can. So that, I guess, is a potential downside. But in general, I don't know. My sort of inclination is to, don't over exaggerate promises and then hopefully over deliver, as opposed to the other way around.
I just want to add that because of the particular scenario that we're in, the crisis and urgency is now, and less so over the 30 years. I'd be more interested in trying to trend as close to what we're experiencing for the next few years, and then look to more more predictable averages as we move out. So I'd be inclined to go for the 7% for the next 3 to 5 years, and then bring it perhaps incrementally down for a few years at 5%, and then maybe 3% after a 10-year period. But and really, the purpose being twofold. One is that those are the trends that we're actually experiencing, and two, because our expenditures are by design for the recovery, and the recovery needs are current.
So I can do that. Y'all need to tell me everybody said 3 to 5, but I need a real number.
I'd say 7% for 5 years is what I would suggest. Any member Pestizo and then member Panamarev, let's all weigh in on this.
Yeah, I would be good with that.
I was going to suggest 7% for the first 3 years and then down to 5% for the second 2 years. I think, and bearing in mind that we can readjust that later, I think I have a little bit of a concern about, being too conservative if we simply don't attempt projects or initiatives because we're underestimating our funding. And yeah, so that's I don't like to be at the end of the year with a lot of extra money that could have gone to some good purpose. So that's kind of churning away. But I'm in agreement with 5 years at 7%. That's okay with me.
And
I was
you'll
gonna say likewise for me as well.
and sorry for my interruption. I think as you budget, you can adjust that every year as you're looking at your budget. So we can put in this model 7% for the first 5 years, and then ramp down to 3% at 10 years. So we'll go 7% in for 5 years and then ramp back down to the 3% and expect and hope that it stays at the 3%. And really, that shouldn't impact your program or project delivery expectations. You're still going to have X amount of money to spend. And you're just going, when you're looking at the project allocations, all we're saying is it might be on housing solutions instead of being able to get 100 units for your 3,900,000, maybe you're only going to get 80 units, or maybe you're really going to get 70 units, but you still have that amount of money to spend. So, and on the hazard mitigation and the trail, it may end up, it should hopefully won't end up costing more than you've estimated, but maybe by then you've really estimated the right amount of money for it. So I think those changes, I don't see a problem with them, and I know Ally can get those done for me right away. So another question, do you want me to go moving on? I think everybody agreed to that. So let's just make sure everybody agrees before I move on to the next question.
Yes, I agree. And I need to step away for about 2 minutes. So I'm going to hand the gavel to member Panamarev. I would hand it to Clark, but as the vice chair, but he's not sitting on the subcommittee. So member Panamarev, can you take it for about 2 minutes?
Sure.
Thanks. And I'm going to take this chance to just pop away real quick as well and be right back.
Everybody can take a 2-minute break if you want one.
That would be great.
Okay, let's take 2 minutes. We'll come back at I'm showing 3:11. Let's say we'll come back at 3:15. Sound good?
Has everybody returned? That's always a funny question to ask. Is there anybody who, if you have returned, if you'll just raise your hand so I know you're all here, that'd be great. We're just waiting on one member and Elaine.
This is Elaine. I'm here. I just can't figure out how to raise my hand and share my screen at the same time. So I am here.
Mayor, are
you.
you back?
Yeah,
Yeah, you
Yeah.
you put me in charge and I gave everybody the day off. So
that's what I love about you. You're just such a great leader. All right, so let's go ahead. It looks like everybody's back. So Elaine will pick up where we left off.
Yes, so I was going back to administration. I believe that administration included an executive director's salary, and I don't know. I believe so, Jordan. Is that true? So I don't know, if you're planning, what you're planning to do there, that TURA would have its own executive director or not. But so I need you to tell me what number you want me to put in the administration line.
Jordan, let me ask you a question. Would you, for example, just doing my best at guessing here, let's say we hired a consultation on hazard mitigation on the Wagner Creek, for example. How would that be coded?
How would that be coded? Do you mean that would be coded under capital outlay? But
So
it
would
would
it be an administrative cost?
It'd be business contracting services through a capital project.
Is that administrative costs?
I would consider that a capital project specific administrative cost. If that makes any sense. So the administration, I would be looking at more of someone who does all administering aspects. And I can actually reach out to the finance director of City of Talent to recommend how she would code it. But I do know the administration for the past year has been the grants management, the annual reporting of the urban renewal, the invoicing and all of that jazz. Things like that.
tasks that
It-
will, those tasks will all otherwise be handled by city staff and billed to urban renewal, correct?
Yes, and looking historically, when the city has been in charge of the urban renewal agency, I think, you know, the reimbursement that we got on a per hour basis was $75,000 to $100,000 a year.
Yeah, that goes back to like 2018 and older, right? I mean, that's
That would be 2018, 2019.
2019?
It was before Healthy Sustainable Communities took over.
2019. And so 2019 was, so I recall 2019 was the heavier cost burden, right? Well, that was the one that was at about 100,000.
You know, I would have to look back at the budgets of TURA.
Yeah, I think I mean, I wouldn't ask anybody else to rely on that, but I'm relying on it. I'm fairly certain of that.
Yeah. I mean, admittedly, I would recommend a high administration cost depending on the type of affordable housing programs that the board has decided to add into the plan. If they would like to see TURA administer affordable housing programs, that is a very high administrative cost.
Yeah.
And I would actually increase that up closer to depending on the size of the program, but more of a 300 to 500,000 range, based off of feedback I've gotten from Ashland.
Great. Is there any other comments or questions? So I think Elaine needs some instructions on this, and I would
do.
recommend that we apply the higher amount because of the 60 to 70% of housing, so that we can develop a housing program. Anybody want to weigh in on that? Member Panamarev.
Yeah, I just want to, so if it's for, and I agree with you, housing program, housing authority, whatever, would that wouldn't go under the housing solutions, line item?
Not the administration of it.
Okay, yeah, then I'm in agreement. I think, so we're saying between 200 and 300,000?
I'm saying 500.
Oh, you're saying 500.
I say that because I think it's important for us to be adequately funded.
Well, I think, yeah, I agree that housing is the primary goal here. So yeah.
Can I interject with a comment?
Please.
That hand raising button keeps moving on me. You know, the high cost administration of a housing program would really occur after the homes are built and people are living in them, and if the city is the one if the urban renewal is the one administering an affordable housing program. Those first few years it will take, and actually I can show you a quick visual here if that helps. Elaine, if you don't mind, I'm going to stop your screen share really quick so I can show the housing potentials here. So what you all are looking at on this map is green is affordable housing projects that are already underway within urban renewal. Pink is affordable housing already underway outside of urban renewal, except for, you know, this plot fell through with Catholic Charities. So if our housing was our focus within this urban renewal area, it would largely be TURA having to help support the creation of new houses rather than supporting the creation of programs already in progress. And so those costs will probably take about 3 years to go through, you know, the site improvements, the planning, the building, and then the moving folks in. So that administration burden wouldn't hit until several years down the line.
Well, with that great input, I would see, I still think that there is going to be at least the same administrative burden for the next couple of years that we currently have, because I think there's going to be, I mean, I don't think, I know there's going to be a great deal of program development up to that point. So Elaine, would it make sense for us to set it at like 200,000 to 300,000 for the first 3 years and then move it to $500,000? And I'd hate to decide to move it to $500,000 in 3 years and be late to the party. But anyway, your thoughts on that?
I can't really answer that because I don't know for sure what all you're expecting the city to do in terms of the housing administration. So, you know, if you're using existing Jackson County Housing Authority, they have existing staff. If you're using any other nonprofits, they have staff. If you're creating your own, I don't have numbers for that. I can put 215 in as $2022, which moves up to 228 for 2024 dollars. And then you increase that as if you're thinking that you're administering that over time. And then that will end up increasing by those inflation rates that we just talked about that aren't, I haven't put those in here yet. Or, you know, I can put that as $300,000 if you want.
Any other comments? Member Panamarev?
I have a feel that the between the $200,000 and $300,000 range in the beginning, closer to 200,000. I think the early administration would probably be more like something like the Jackson County Housing Authority. That's at least, it's just kind of my vision, the way based on the conversations we've had, kind of the way I see it rolling out. But that with the understanding that we may need to pump that up later on to meet our goals.
Member Postizo and then Jordan?
Yeah, I just, I got a little distracted, so I may have missed this, but if we're doing only a couple 100,000 the first year or two, what is that actually spent on? Is that part of what's spent on, like, you know, trying to broker purchasing some land or something like that? I'm just wondering where the 200,000 came from, and if we really have something substantial to base it on, or we're pretty much taking an educated guess.
200,000 is based on the last couple of years of history. So
Okay.
history of our administrative costs. Jordan?
Yeah, I will say, since Member Pacino, I think you were here, that 215,000 is what Healthy Sustainable Communities was providing the Urban Renewal Agency. So all the activities that they were doing. I will say in terms of city expenses, 250,000 is about, I would say 2 1/3 to 2.5 FTE, including an executive director level position. So that helps you all understand the amount of work that can get done. I think 2.5 FTE would be a great amount of folks to do work for these initial years, particularly.
And that includes, like, so Nikki, for instance, if there was GIS work to do, that would fall within that 2.5 FTE.
It could. Currently, it has not been, but it could.
Okay. Only because we've invested in pretty heavily in some tools, and this could be the time when we could really put them to use.
Okay, so I would say making the budget something like 250 for the next couple of years and raising it up to 500,000 in 3 years. Does that, Jordan, does that sound like it would approximately handle the cost burden?
Without understanding the type of affordable housing programs the board is interested, I would say that gives you a lot of flexibility. If the board is not looking to act as a housing authority, I would say I believe that that could be reduced down the line.
I mean, I for one have been pretty excited about some of the programs that have already, that we've already talked about. And then also looking to Ashland for, I think in one conversation we had within this last year, looking to them for the programs that are working well for them as an opportunity as well. So sorry, I'm trying to operate my functions while I'm talking, which is serving to be a challenge. I don't like zooming on my phone. And by the way, I have a hard stop at 3:30. So if we want to give some direction on this item, I have to leave in like just a minute or so. Anybody else? Member Postizo?
I think that from everything I've heard, the proposal with the 200 the first couple of years and then ramping up as we might do something seems reasonable.
Anybody else? Member Ponomarev?
Yeah, it's just, I get the 250,000, I think you said, Jordan, for 2.5 FTE. And that would be a good number, you said, for you to the work as you see it. But then after that point, 3 years later, depending what kind of a housing authority, if we want to do that program, we do it. I guess what I'm confused about is if the money is really all for staff, that administration money, or it's not anything other than that. Because as far as the Ashland program goes, I thought that was just one person who is running that.
So
If I'm
Ashland-
thinking, go ahead.
Sorry, I was jumping straight in with providing context there. I apologize. So Ashland's program, and also I wanted to provide an opportunity, since I know the mayor has, or the chair has to jump off too, if everyone else is comfortable continuing the meeting, since we do still have quorum with the chair gone. Okay, great. There is some more details I'd love to share as well before folks sign off. So Ashland's program is they have someone who manages their different grant programs. They're running a CDBG, SDC offset for affordable housing. They don't have inclusionary zoning because of the administration costs that would be around it. But they have some policies they're trying out. Their person just manages the bureaucracy of the programs. They have intentionally not wanted to do their own housing authority because of the increase in staff needs to be able to maintain, the property management, the annual checking to make sure that folks are staying within that affordable definition, and all of the other costs associated. That's where we see very high program costs.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. So the mayor has dropped off. Councilor Postizo, I think it's you and me as far as quorum and making this recommendation. So I heard you say, I think you said 200 for the first 3 years. Are you okay with 250 for the first 3 years? Go ahead.
I was just reflecting on what Jordan just said. And there is, I'm a little concerned if we get into actually managing, a program and like the daily ins and outs, that's quite a burden. And then what's the exit ramp to that? It just, especially for a small city, because I know Ashland is bigger than us and they haven't wanted to bite that off. And I'm not positive about Medford, but I know they have 2 staff that work on the grant stuff and the housing. But I'm pretty sure I'm right that Medford doesn't really manage any of the properties directly. So I just have some concerns that we would be biting off a really big chunk for such a small city. And it's a really, and Jordan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like it's a really different skill set than what staff currently does. So we might have to be hiring people specifically for that. And there may not be much depth or crossover if that person were to leave. You know, there could be a real scramble until you get someone else who knows what they're doing in there. So I guess I'm pretty concerned about that.
And I'll just say, I don't think anybody has said, we haven't committed to any sort of property management. I think if I recall, the conversations around a housing, like a mini housing authority, had more to do with orchestration, connecting people with land banking, looking for loans for people, kind of stopgap measures that had to do more with financials than actual property management. And in my experiences talking to the housing authority and the nonprofit potential partners, you know, they do that, as you said. So I wouldn't get too. I don't think we have ever gone down, you know, down the road decision wise as seeing ourselves as property managers. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. But there might be other types of things that we would need staff to help out with.
Right. Well, then I think if the 200 sort of covers that 2 to 2.5 position
250.
or 250, yeah, then I think that's that seems like we'd be in pretty good shape.
Yeah, I think the mayor didn't want to lose an opportunity, so I'm going to suggest we say 250 for the first 3 years, and then maybe 300 for the next 2 years, and then level off at 250. I don't know. That's just gives us a little bump. Or do you just want to say 250 down the road?
I guess the extra 50,000, it doesn't seem like it matters too much any one way or the other. So if you like the 250, I could see how it would give us a little extra cushion when we think we might be really needing it. So I would be fine with that.
Jordan Lane or Member Clark, if you want to weigh in. You're muted, Lane. Go ahead. Sorry.
So I put the 250 in here. You can still see the spreadsheet?
Nope.
Okay. Can you now?
Yes.
So I put the 250 in and then up to 300 after 3 years, and you can see what it does to your ability to spend money on projects. So you have money the first year, you have another 120,000 the second year, but the next 4 years, you only have money to pay administration if you're putting that much in. When you do your next big bond sale, and I've got to reduce $1 million here. This can't be in the negative. So if that goes in the negative, I have to go down here and change that so that this is in the positive. Otherwise, if the spreadsheet doesn't work. So
well, I'm not sure that we were going to go to 500 in 2029. Why don't we just for the purposes of not having negative numbers for the moment, just put this at 250. Yeah, straight across.
okay, that's
And since that was, I'll just withdraw the whole 300. Yeah, 250 all the way down.
okay.
Great.
So you see that gives me money I can allocate back to, I still have to change this allocation, but I can add back to projects, 155 here, 355, 631. So this shows $1 million of hazard mitigation up front, 800 to commercial solutions, which I can start adding back in. That was what the next add, and the transportation I tried to add in so that we could open up that other property. So I guess the last question I'd like to get answered before we sign off is in terms of once we have, some money funded here and here, and we have additional money to fund between commercial solutions and trying to fund that railroad crossing that does open up developable property, which priority do you want me to allocate to, and do you have an idea of how much?
Great question. Can you remind me how much we needed for the property for the railroad thing?
Jordan, do you have that handy? I have it here.
This is admittedly a laywoman's estimate. Was around 850,000.
Right. Okay.
So I don't have anything there at this point. I could probably pick up 850 in 2027, 28 here, but that means I wouldn't be able to allocate it to commercial solutions.
Go ahead, Jordan.
What we're seeing in terms of the numbers on the ground. It is our commercial, specifically our downtown area, that is having no movement in terms of rebuild.
So I know we were talking about 60% to housing solutions, but I can see shifting some of that away. Jordan, do you want to, and Dave, you're free to, I think you missed the part where Jordan explained about Wagner Creek in terms of hazard mitigation, and that came to about $1 million. And then also there's that potential land acquisition around a railroad thing. So Jordan, I'd love to hear your analysis, what you think about.
Oh, can I just?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just
Go
want to
ahead.
make sure I understand this. So which railroad thing are we talking about?
We're talking about RAP, right? Jordan, why don't you go ahead and explain?
Okay.
Yeah, and Elena, I'm going to take over share screen one more time.
Okay. Then I can lower my hand.
So here we go, right here. So right here is a very large, developable property that could have residential in it. It is not currently developable because there is not a publicly improved railroad crossing right here. We would need to do upgrades to this railroad. We'd actually need to take in this little corner into our UGB boundary and then eventually annex it to be able to change the curve of this road. But the long-term transportation plan shows a connector road connecting Rapp Road and Belmont Road down here to open up this area for residential development.
So
Sorry, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, we really need 2 railroad crossings then, right?
We do. The other railroad crossing, however, did not make it into the boundary due to the 25% max that has been hit.
Right. Well, because I think here, that property you're talking about, we're liable to run into a similar situation we had with the Belmont, where, I mean, how many people are we going to put over there with just one way in and out again?
There is technically, other pathways out that could be created for that one.
Across the railroad tracks?
So there's a road coming in, and I'm sorry, I'm not great with road names. A route here, and I believe there's also some dirt emergency roads.
Also, I see. That difference is they can get out the other direction.
Yeah,
Okay.
off RAP.
Okay, I feel better about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, whereas you don't have that. It's
All right,
further
well,
south.
thanks for explaining that.
Yeah, thanks, Jordan. Right, so if we could go back to the spreadsheet, I think, Elaine, you have to reshare. And so if you can't raise your hand, Elaine, you can just start
Oh.
talking. That's fine.
You don't see it?
Oh,
I-
no, we see it. We see it.
Okay, so. So I put some money in commercial solutions. I mean, I guess the big question is right here is, do you put the money in housing or commercial solutions? And when I was down there and I hear Jordan also say your immediate need is the commercial. So maybe this money doesn't immediately go into housing. I mean, I just don't know that call about how much money goes here and how much money goes here in the beginning. Knowing that it can be changed, but also knowing that it should give you, an idea of how you're wanting to start the area.
Right. I'm also wondering, do we, so we wanted to put, what was it, 800,000 in there as well, in the transportation category
Yeah, and all
for
of
what
it.
we were just looking at?
Won't let me do that. Right, so what I've got here,
So you could copy it down and then just delete the numbers, right? Control V down.
well, it
It won't let you do it.
up the rest of the formula, so.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
I just put those in the wrong line.
Ah, okay.
Oh, I see.
So it looks like, okay, and then we put the rest of it there. So there we get there over the course of a
Oh.
few years.
Yeah,
Okay.
Do we know how likely that whoever owns that tax lot we're looking at, what the likelihood of that being amenable to affordable housing there?
I'll let Jordan answer that.
Member Pestizo, are you talking about the one across the railroad where we need to do the railroad improvement?
Right.
Yes.
So they are amenable to it. And so it's something that could go forward fairly quickly.
Yes, but it would require that railroad crossing improvement, which would require a railroad crossing application.
And is that like
which
a
is-
year or more to hope to get something like that through?
I would give it a year. I think, that one I would expect it to be less controversial because it's already a public crossing. It's just upgrading it to a higher level of public crossing. But I would say I would need to find out more info for that.
Okay,
That side
I
of
was
things.
just wondering if we want to move some of that up closer, because last meeting we were talking about where are places that, we could get a big enough piece of land to have like the housing authority come in and make it pencil out. And if, I don't know the size of that lot, but it seemed fairly big. If that was one, then it seems like that would be something, if it's ready to go, other than the railroad crossing for the most part, we'd want to move on it pretty quick so we can get some housing in.
Yeah, I will share all the major tracts of land that are currently in the urban renewal area. One concern, sorry, Elaine, I'm gonna keep stealing the screen share from you. So since this piece of property is not in the urban renewal area,
Oh,
we could only use funds to upgrade the railroad crossing. Any road installment access, water infrastructure, anything like that would have to come from either the city of Talent, or if the housing authority is the one doing the project, the housing authority. Same with this property right here. It would need to be repiped and get all the infrastructure put in. The best bet is
okay.
the gateway site. But we will need to find permanent housing for the folks living there first before we can move forward with construction. And that will also be a time crunch as well.
All right.
So
and then
my best
maybe-
answer is complicated and I can't give great estimates.
Okay. All right.
And we don't actually necessarily have to be the ones buying the land. We can just help, support a nonprofit if it comes to that.
For that parcel.
Well, it
Yeah.
seems like getting a railroad crossing there would be a huge benefit to whoever wanted to develop it.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we're back to the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Elaine, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. And I think really, I'll have to have Ally check me on all this, but what I have to do is whenever I make a change in here, I have to make sure I'm still in a positive number up here.
Mhm.
Up here, I start getting more money, and this is, at the 10 years out. So allocating in the next 20 years. And so the real question is just giving me thumbnail on percentage allocations into projects. And so I know we talked about some needs, and so we've got $11.25 million to allocate, and we aren't going to do that, in the spreadsheet now, but out of that, Jordan, I know this is asking you to put numbers to CIP projects that don't have numbers, but if you can give me any kind of ballpark of a gross number to put there for the water or whatever other infrastructure that we need, and then we'll see how much more we have left to allocate to anything else. So
And Elaine, I'm happy to do that. I will need to work with our public works director, Brett.
Sure.
And Brett is currently out sick today, so I would have to connect with him tomorrow.
yeah. And I think what I can do, tomorrow's Tuesday, I can work with Ally once we get that information, get this updated, and then send it out to people to look at and maybe respond to before I put it in final to look at Wednesday night. And with a summary email of what it really means.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm just, before we leave, it sounds like you're wanting to wrap up. People have to leave at 4. Is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would love just a few minutes. I do have some potential other recommendations to submit to them.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, definitely go ahead, Jordan. I just want to make sure, Elaine, so you have what you need for now from us?
I do.
Okay.
And
And
I'd like to stay on if it's okay, Jordan, to
Oh, sure.
listen.
It's a public meeting.
We'll
Go
kick
ahead.
Elaine out into the audience. No. Okay, perfect. So Elaine, are you all good for next steps to get that project or that plan fleshed out, and then I'll follow up with capital costs?
Yes, and I'll probably, I don't know your schedule tomorrow, but I'll probably want to call you and share it with you first and go walk through it before I send it out to anybody.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, and I just want to say, it felt like that we wanted to, that we felt that we didn't have enough money maybe in the commercial in the initial year, and maybe what Dave was saying about bringing the transportation costs forward so we could work on that railroad crossing within the next year. That might also be, I'm not sure if that was understood. That I think that would probably pull away from the probably from the housing
It would
number.
have to pull away from housing. There's no
Yeah,
other.
and
place to-
it makes sense that it does, because I mean that transportation money is enabling housing. So I think
So
that's
move
fine.
up the railroad crossing and move up more money to commercial solutions. Understanding housing, then we'll wait till the next bond sale to have a big amount of money.
Yeah, well, I think we still have pretty big amount of money. We'll still have, will we have 3 million?
No,
Oh, because you're moving up the entire transportation thing up.
yeah, if I move all of that up to here, I've got to take 850 or 900,000 away from
Yeah,
something.
we're not seeing your spreadsheet anymore.
Yeah, so she's down to, so you're down to like 2 million for the housing,
Yeah.
Wait, wasn't that 10 million before we got started here?
6 million.
Yep.
The first year, right?
Oh, I
Yep.
see the.
No, it was
first year.
always 3.4 million here, but the total was 10 here.
Yeah,
But
Yeah.
what has happened is you added in administration
Mhm.
and we
yeah.
increased our inflation costs. So those things have caused other, it all impacts other places. So I will work on this and with a directive to move the railroad crossing up in time and to try to fund a bit more for commercial solutions, but still leaving some money for the housing, and then increasing the housing allocations as we move forward.
Yeah, I think if we think about the transportation as housing, I think that's okay. I think
I
we're
guess-
still on mission. Go ahead.
As far as the transportation. Oh, I see what she's doing. Yeah, I mean, if the first part of it is getting all the, the permits and everything in place, do we really need to put all of it in the first year?
Good point.
Because I'm assuming the bulk of it is for whatever actual construction needs to happen.
You don't, but the problem is you don't get a lot of money in the second year. So whether you put it in the first year or the second year, it doesn't really free up that much more money for
Oh.
housing because it's going to take away from that housing. Because you've got, we're over expended here. So let me bring this down.
Yeah. Mhm.
So
Okay.
that gets us back into positive here. And so we've got, a little excess here we can spend. And if we want to put more money here. Then, potentially this would be what your first year would look like if you wanted to move up the railroad crossing, put some more money, whatever's, you've got your hazard mitigation at $1 million, put $1.1 million into commercial solution, and you put 2.3 million into housing.
I'm pretty comfortable with that. Member Pestizo, Member Clark, Jordan, any other thoughts?
I would love to help give my back of the envelope estimates is that 1.1 million commercial solutions would help about 5 brick and mortar commercial buildings go up. If that helps give you some parameters there. And the housing solutions, Elaine gave you quotes on how many it could cover if we built them from scratch. If we were doing just a supporting nonprofits building it and doing, for example, an STC waiver, a 70-unit multifamily apartment complex would be about 400,000 in STCs. So doing the quick math there, that could go far if we were able to find a developer partner in affordable housing.
Yeah, so that could potentially acquire a piece of property or do SDCs or be used for different things. So
Yeah.
it
Well,
might,
we already own one
right,
big piece of property.
right,
Mhm.
right. I think you're right until you figure out how you can develop that.
All right. Well, and if I understand it right, this can be changed as we move forward a little bit and learn what's happening. So I think we've done the best job we can with the, crystal balling the future here.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just want to, sorry, Jason, did you want to add anything to that? Go ahead.
No, I think this all sounds really reasonable, and it's it's been good to get a look at your process going forward, because I have missed the other subcommittee meetings, and appreciate all the work that y'all have been doing on this, and just wanted to say that I realized a little bit into this meeting, I was notified that I was in charge of putting in a proposal by the end of business today. So I was a little distracted, but I'm glad that I was here to get a feel for your process of how you're getting to the numbers that you're producing. And so, yeah, thank you.
We're glad you're here too. So thank you. Okay, so Jordan, I still feel like you'd like to see some of that housing shift into commercial for more bang for our recovery buck, as it were. I just want to invite you to make that. I just want to invite you to say what you just said before about, you know, putting it in the context of 5 brick and mortars versus, you know, the SDC boost for however many things when we talk about it Wednesday, if folks want to shift a little bit. I thought that was helpful.
Yeah, I'll try to put it into more understandable terms rather than just.
No, I think those were great terms. We just,
Well,
it just has to sink in.
well, and for me, it would be a little helpful to get an idea of, you know, what size or type of brick and mortar buildings, right? You know, what would, as far as businesses, would it be like one brick and mortar building is basically would support one business, or would they be like multi-unit brick and mortar? You know what I mean?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have the time to gather that level of detailed information.
What?
More than happy to gather it, but it will not be.
Yeah,
able to be
no, I was
quick.
just wondering if you already knew, because, you know, when you get down to it, all these things start to, you know, the questions start to come up, but I understand there's time constraints.
My estimates are coming from talking to folks on the ground that are trying to rebuild. So just hearing their stories and relaying the numbers that they send off to me.
Well, that's wonderful. Okay, so we're going to go a little bit over, if that's okay with folks. Jordan has some more to tell us, so go ahead, Jordan.
Yeah, so I, spent some good chunk of hours this weekend on the plane ride in the motel room, and yesterday, just trying to really sit with my executive director TURA hat on, because really recognizing that there's been really solid themes throughout the creation of this plan. Like, yes, we are sprinting at the end to identify the actual projects, but there's been this really consistent description of the goal of this plan, and the intent of this plan is to, make sure those communities that were most impacted by the fire still have the opportunity to be a vibrant and integral part of our community. So that's what we're really talking about, is that affordable, attainable housing are really those communities that get isolated out. So trying to carry that and trying to understand, as someone who would be an implementer of this plan, is what is our ability to make that happen? Or how is this plan going to help us really get to that core intent? Because I really want the intent to match the impacts. Looking at research papers, post-disasters areas where FEMA dollars get invested tend to gentrify 4 to 10 times faster than they would have. So we are racing against that gentrification or that quick increase in cost in areas. And I really want to help make sure this plan is not putting that to threat. And so I just wanted to point out to you some of the things that I'm trying to come through a lens, and then make some recommendations of how we can maybe account for how do we skip that same issue of areas gentrifying when there's a huge influx of money into them. So I'm going to do the screen share. I love that this is my hand-drawn map, and I've already been able to show it many times today. Once again, not enough time to do official reports. So the biggest need, I know there's affordable housing and attainable housing. And attainable housing is really defined to include also the 80% to 120% of area median income. That workforce housing is another term often. So I know there was some question on that definition in the first subcommittee meeting. So as we were, just discussing earlier, is how can we make our housing dollars go far? And the options is we could build our own housing units. We could help support nonprofits building them, and a mix of both. And so I really want to just be very clear around what's going on in the community right now and how urban renewal may or may not be able to support them. So what you're looking at here, is the urban renewal boundary. Green is the areas that are within urban renewal that were either affordable housing before the fire or earmarked to continue to be affordable housing after the fire. So this is town mobile estates, and this is totem pole. Things in pink are affordable housing projects that are not inside the urban renewal area. So this one here is Anderson Vista. I just learned last week that they just got the go-ahead from USDA to rebuild, which is awesome. They do have a financial gap that they will be working to help fill the cover on to help make that rebuild fully happen. Housing Authority, there's a lot of money out there in the world right now for the rebuild down here, but that is an area that if we wanted to minutely change the boundary, we could help Anderson Vista, which is a 37 unit farm worker housing complex. Right here, which is just outside the urban renewal area, is that Renaissance Flats. They are a 72 unit multifamily apartment. They were able to get a little extra funding from the state to just tip the scales because they were facing economic infeasibility. They did make a request to the city for an SDC waiver. They have not followed up on that request. I don't know if they still need it or not, but that was a need of theirs to make it pencil out about 3 months ago. Here, this is a private project that's developing 22 senior affordable housing units. They just received $3 million from OHCS to do that. If they have to drop the density, it may not be able to pencil out. So this could be another area that if we're able to do minor tweaks, we could help support that housing. And this area right here is going to be where Catholic Charities was looking at placing their 50 units of affordable housing. They ended up having to back out due to the costs. They just couldn't make it pencil, largely because there's a road right here that would need to be brought to a collector standard road, which is a high cost for a developer to do, and it would reduce the amount of units they can put on. So that little slivers change could help a lot with urban renewal, affordable housing efforts. And then we have Wagner Creek, which is a 22 unit manufactured home park that's looking for homes. And then Mountain View Estates, which is the 55 plus manufactured home community. So really what this comes down to is right now, 2/3 of the projected affordable housing in our community is not within the urban renewal area. So just being aware of that, and if there is any minor tweaks that we want to do to include any specific projects in to help support them, it could behoove us. The challenge here is if we maintain this current boundary, we will mostly rely on building our own or bringing in a new partner to get more housing in the pipeline down the road. So it'd be of a less immediate housing right in the moment, but more of a 2 to 3 to 5 year affordable housing coming up. So recommendations, if we want to support affordable housing in the very short term, would be to make adjustments to our urban renewal area to include these and support them as a safety net for making sure this affordable housing gets built. If we move forward with the plan as is and decide to change this later, because we're at that 25% mark, and Elaine, you can correct me, it would be a substantive amendment, meaning that we'd have to go through a very similar process to what we're going through now for the urban renewal plan itself. So another potential option is to take out a portion that would bring us down to a less of a size and would give us more flexibility to adapt to affordable housing needs as they pop up. Any questions on projects that are currently in the pipeline? Yeah, Member Quinn Alvarez.
Well, I am actually just making sure I want to understand that if we reduce the down from 25% the area, that gives us the ability to add on later.
So my understanding, and Elaine, this would probably be the better answer. I'll just let Elaine have it rather
Yeah,
than
go
me.
ahead, Elaine.
Once you have an area established, you may only ever add 20% more of the original acreage. So I don't have the acreage of this area in front of me, but I know it's not 100 and it's 200 and something, I think.
212.
Yeah, so you can only add 20% of that, which would be 424, 42 acres. So but to be able to add those 42 acres, you will have to subtract acreage from the existing area because there's those two limitations. The one is that you can only add 20% more to your existing, and the other is you may not exceed a total of 25%. And since this is right at your total of 25%, to be able to add, you have to first subtract.
And the major versus minor amendment, could you?
Gets initiated after 1%. So on 200 acres, it would be 2 acres. You could add 2 acres and a minor amendment. Anything over 2 acres is a substantial amendment by statute.
Go ahead, Jason?
I was just thinking if that road limitation up there at the next to the property that Catholic Charities was looking at is going to be a persistent problem, that might be a lot spatially, a lot of impact per the space to consider and add on if we think that, you know, that would open up opportunities on that property that otherwise wouldn't be there. It was just a thought. It wouldn't cost you that much area to then be able to work on that road, improve that road up to a standard that would make it a more attractive option. Because I mean, whether or not it's affordable housing or not, if it's of a certain density, that's what's driving the need to upgrade the road, right? So yeah, just a thought I wanted to throw out there.
So if we did commit to building that road, is Catholic Charities still, would they still consider coming in and doing their project then? Or is that ship sailed?
I would reach out to them to see if they have continued interest.
And I can add, Dave, that the Catholic Charities has been visiting talent since then, and they you know, they've expressed the desire to work with us. So they're still interested in talent.
So I would be inclined to pick a couple of these, like Jason's got a great point that's could be a pretty big bang for the real estate involved. To get some of these ones that are sort of ready to go with a little extra boost, because to Jordan's point, otherwise we're probably going to be a while recruiting other developers. So this would get something going sooner that wants to get going, but just can't quite get over the hump. I'm not exactly sure now. I'd have to review which ones those would be, but like Mountain View Estate seems like it's such a big piece of ground that would be a real impact trying to adjust our boundary at this point. But these other ones are smaller, and it might be easier to figure out how to put 1 or 2 of them in at least without having to remove anything to, you know, that we've had our hearts set on.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Elaine?
I think it would be very interesting to know the acreage for number 1, the acreage of the road for number 2, the acreage for number 3, and the acreage for number 6. And then look at what we have to get rid of to equal that acreage. You all got, I think, a copy of the report that I did over last, I guess, 2 weekends ago, that, you know, is like a 40 or 50 page document. That whole report will have to be changed if we change the boundary. Whether or not I can do that magic before Wednesday night is a question, because it's not just me, it's Tiberius having to, we have to create new maps, we have to create new parcel data information. however, if we keep it to those discrete ones, I mean, I guess now we would have to look at what potentially would we take out.
Which would require you recalculating
Every,
the amounts. Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah, because you'd say, oh, let's just take out this whole chunk. So we have more real estate, but there's all sorts of estimates that have gone in to figure out, the TIF and all of that.
right. So if you took out undeveloped land, it's not really going to affect your TIF, but it will affect your ability to develop on that land because it won't be in the area anymore to receive the benefits. So trying to be strategic and looking at, Jordan asked me about a couple of large parcels, and unfortunately, I don't know the area well enough to know exactly why those parcels are in, or if they really have to be in or need to be in. So, for
Mhm.
example, a parcel that's directly adjacent to number 2. I'm not sure whether that parcel can come out or not. If that parcel can come out, I think all the rest of 1, 2, 3, and 6 can fit in.
I'm gonna call on Jason in a second, but I was actually thinking more towards just that kind of that triangle on top of Valley View, and the Greenway. I think that was that's all undeveloped, or not all undeveloped, but there's a chunk of it that's undeveloped. Jason.
Yeah, I think that triangle is the truck stop and the gas station. It looks like it runs between Bear Creek and Wagner Creek.
Is it Suncrest Park as well?
Well, I think
So this-
Suncrest Park would be in the
Okay.
part that's just out there. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So
Um,
Suncrest Park would not be covered under this URA.
right.
Okay.
So how long to do a minor amendment? How long does that process take? And what I'm getting at is, could we make amendments, specific amendments to the area down the road based on specific needs as we become aware of them? For instance, the road by number 2 there, could and any others that, if there's a need and we could say, look, we're willing to amend our plan to meet this need, could we kind of make an agreement contingent upon the minor amendment going through, and then, change the boundary at that time, and then meet the need, carry out the project to specifically open the door for something like affordable housing on parcel number 2, for instance.
Okay, so the restrictions on adding property are, number 1, you have a one-time up to 1% that you can do through a minor amendment. So 1% of a little over 200 acres is about 2 acres. So you can add 2 acres, and it could be a half acre here, a half acre there, 4 half-acre parcels up, but only that amount, 1%, through a minor amendment, which is just a resolution of your agency, and then sending a copy of the legal description to the assessor. That's easy. Anytime you exceed that 1%, it becomes a substantial amendment that by statute is the same process as adopting an original urban renewal plan, which is what we're in now. So it's long, it's a minimum of 6 months, really.
Okay, all right, so that's helpful. So the 1%, so you really only have that 2 acres that you could play with one time, presumably.
Easily, one time, easily.
Elaine, what if that 2 acres puts us over 25%?
Oh,
We have-
but you can't ever go over 25%. So you'll have to delete. If it does, you'll have to also at the same time delete. Deleting is just a minor amendment. Any deletion is a minor amendment. It's just the adding that over a 1% that becomes a substantial amendment.
Okay. So just to sum up, Elaine, you said what looked like it would be doable would be 1, 2, 3, and 4.
1, 2, 3, and 6. 6 is
One,
housing
sorry,
authority.
1, 2, 3, and 6. Okay. And provided that we found preferably undeveloped land to swap that out.
Yeah, and when I say doable, I'm saying making that decision. I'm not. I can do my best to try to get documents done by Wednesday night, but it's Monday night now. And everything
Yeah.
changed in the report.
And I also think that it's probably not up to the subcommittee to make that call. It's probably the entire board that would have to say, yes, we want to make that change. And then for you to like have to develop both options so we could then choose is not doable by Wednesday night.
I don't think so. What I can do is look at the calendar and say, okay, if you do some special meetings here instead of set meetings, you might still be able to meet your calendar. So we've put your calendar together predicated on meeting on regular meeting dates. The Planning Commission on a regular meeting date, the City Council hearing on a regular meeting date. We could look at changing that, and I would have to look at the overall schedule to do that, to see, well, okay, what happens if? I am suspecting we can figure out how to do that if you're willing to do that.
I suspect that this board would not have any trouble with special meetings. I'm not sure how the entire board would feel about changing the boundary, as were some of the things that we're suggesting, even the kind of the hybrid version of just 1, 2, 3, and 6. I do think I bet you there would be consensus about just adding the road and slivering off somewhere.
The road is easy that I could get, well, I would have to get from Jordan, knowledge of how much acreage that road was. And if a right of way isn't already set out on the road, that becomes more difficult. But in terms of if somebody can give me information on where that road goes and the acreage of it, I can change the documents by Wednesday night to do that. But all of this other stuff, probably not.
The other thing I'm thinking about is a lot of this kind of was designed with buildable lands in mind. And we weren't really thinking about, providing that, the last 10 yards to projects that are underway. But I see, to Jordan's point, I think there's a lot of benefit to that. The question is that benefit worth this reevaluation? And, in the end, what would we decide? Jason?
Sorry, this is just a little micro thing, but right up there in the north, north of the Public Works property, northeast of the actual number 2 where it's written, that sliver, isn't that the sliver that was just donated to the city? Right, and it's on a slope, and it's really part of the riparian corridor. Yeah.
I will share that I was not part of being aware of how this boundary was set, so I don't know the context of it. I would love to make recommended changes about what could be removed, because it's not buildable land, or it's not, it would be maintaining land rather than, like, that piece I think would just be a maintenance piece.
Yeah.
And so I don't see how it fits in with the urban renewal picture. Some other questions I have around is like, this is the RV park down off of West Valley View, and what the board was thinking about their vision for that. But what I could get with my planning staff, but what does boil down to difficulty is time and recommendation on changes.
Yeah, if I remember right, I think that sliver of land, there was some hope of trying to get a bike pedestrian path down and connect with Bear Creek somewhere down there. And I don't know if that's how feasible that really is, but that I think was part of the thinking.
Yeah, I know there's a plan for a footbridge, to get you over to the Greenway over there, but I don't remember the exact placement or if ever one was determined.
Yeah. But I think we have to keep in mind, if our top priority really is affordable housing, I think we have to, sort of err on the side of that when we have, tough choices to make. But I do agree with Councillor Penavroff that it's really not the subcommittee's position to do this. So maybe the best thing we can do is see if we can create some special meeting process that gives us a little more time to review this with the whole board and make a decision in enough time that Elaine can actually do and Jordan do what they need to do to change these documents. Thanks, Jordan.
If only you guys didn't know. Put me on the team before 2 weeks ago. So what the decision is going to be, it sounds like, is Elaine, you'll move forward with preparing the plan as was decided earlier in the subcommittee meeting today. We will not include any of the actual land adjustments. And it sounds like at the Wednesday night meeting, I will make a presentation around recommendations of land changes with the understanding if the board would like to adopt any of them, what they will be adopting as a new timeline. And so that Elaine and I figure out if it's possible and what that timeline would be before
Yeah.
Wednesday's meeting. Okay. So that was the topic of affordable housing. I would also love to just share some topics around attainable housing.
Yeah.
Oh,
please.
no. So, all of these hashes, this is all really talking about affordable housing. Folks who likely make less than 80% of area median income would live in these areas. Attainable housing, which is the 80% to 120% AMI, they're going to be more folks who are renting from folks who own property, folks who may, if they can find it, a house that's, below $300,000 in cost, they might be able to purchase with some assistance. So really attainable housing within this zone is very unlikely to occur, given the level of build back that's occurring, how dense it's occurring, and the high cost of the build back. So folks who, may have been living here and, want to come back and purchase land, they're going to be looking at housing outside of the burn area because the burn area is rebuilding too fast for us to really counter how much higher property is going to cost and houses are going to cost in this area. So if we were interested in doing a home ownership program, it will really have very little impact in this area due to the cost of houses that will likely occur. And so I just want, as folks are thinking about the housing programs, it would require substantial change to the area if we wanted to include parts of town that we know will have more attainable housing that we could help folks purchase, or just recognize that our affordable housing or the money we're allocating to affordable housing will likely not go towards home ownership programs.
So the question comes to mind, if you're talking about, an area that is not part of the burn scar and an area that is probably not blighted, how would that fit in?
Well, I'm actually thinking of some blighted areas around town.
Okay.
There are properties currently for sale that could use some TLC to get back to either a more resilient, long-term housing ideal. There's a couple behind here City Hall right now that are for sale. Along Main Street, off these side streets of Front, First and Second. Recently, some sales have happened that have been, more reasonable than what we're seeing in the burn scar area.
And
yeah.
sorry, no, I just want to make sure. And we don't have to have, if I remember looking at, I guess, John Day's plan, they don't have to be contiguous. Is that right, Elaine?
They do have to be contiguous, but you can make them contiguous through a cherry stem.
Oh, okay, so that's what those were, those green lines in the thing. Okay.
So just recognizing what the proposed plan is that will be a limitation. Moving forward with the proposed plan. You know, my other concern is looking into trying to figure out where affordable housing has really been successful through urban renewal. There's not a lot of examples out there. I would say that I actually haven't found true successes yet. A lot of folks trying. But there is a lot of feedback around how investing in cleanup of areas is leading to high displacement. So the idea of if we do build a walking path and clean up Wagner Creek, it could make it more attractive for folks who want to live along there. You know, we do have right here along here our Shady Brooks Manufactured Home Park right here, and some other houses along here that are older houses. You know, those folks might be displaced by costs or by developers offering to buy out the land. So my recommendation for that would be, before we move forward with any major development, is to make sure we have really strong anti-displacement policies in place to protect folks as we're doing hazard mitigation and as we're doing emergency preparedness and resiliency. Because what they're finding is resiliency efforts, particularly in coastal communities where most of the research has been done, is it's actually displacing folks who they are intending to support. So just mindful implementation is really the recommendation around that, and really coordinating with the city about what policies can help.
So those would be city policies, kind of like what we did with you can't, you know, get rid of your mobile home park.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
You know, if we wanted to, urban renewal could expand that Wagner Creek area to include the parcels on either side. But that would, once again, would be an acreage change that would change the numbers.
Councilor Pestizo.
Well, this is some, how would you put it, really good food for thought. And of course, as often happens, these things come at the 11th hour. But so it seems to me, what I would like to see is, A, to see if we have a timeline that gives us a little more breathing room to really consider them. And B, if Jordan can come with, you know, some proposals on how we might do these things. You know, you brought up 2 different housing types. So it'd be interesting to see, you know, maybe 2 scenarios or maybe even 3 if you have the time on, you know, if we wanted to do, you know, the 80% or less. Oh, and then the, you know, the 80 to 120, what that shifting around of the boundaries would be. Because it is a good point, because I was really hoping we could provide, you know, some home ownership opportunities for the lower income folks. And I'm not surprised by what you're saying. I guess I hadn't thought about it in the detail that you're presenting. So if we have the time realistically to make these sort of changes to our boundary, I think we owe it to sort of part of our engendering kind of attempt to create this urban renewal area to take a look at them, because housing, I think, as long as, ever since I've been on the planning commission even, you know, affordable housing has been a high priority in the city. And this may be one of the best opportunities we're ever going to have to try to have some influence on it. So I like to see what, you know, where is the bigger bang for the bucks? What Jordan presented tonight with these projects that are going on is really helpful, because some of them aren't that big. We might be able to put them in this area, like along Rapp Road. If that could be a way to get some home ownership possibly, or even, it sounds like, enable people to stay in the homes they're already in. I feel like if it's not too late for us to consider it, these are the things we need to really consider. I think you're muted.
I was going to say that is the $1 million question, a couple of $1 million if it could be at stake. Go ahead, Elaine.
Well, I'm looking at the calendar, and you know, part of this And unfortunately, the assessor was not totally clear with me on when he will certify the tax roll. And we could call him back and ask him if he has any more surety on that. Normally, assessors don't certify a tax roll until the second week in October. That's when they have to certify it, and that's when they do. He said he likes to do his earlier, but he also said that he's had staffing issues and that he probably won't get it done earlier, and that he anticipates it will be sometime after October 1st. I have never seen an assessor in Oregon, I've been doing this for 17 years, certified before October 1st, but that doesn't mean they can't. They can certify before if I think it's between the 25th of September, they could certify then if they want to. If he certifies, the earliest that he can, then you would want to make your plan effective the day before the earliest date he can certify, which gives us maybe a week. If we think it's going to be the 1st of October, which is typically when it is, it gives us 2 weeks. And 2 weeks is much more comfortable than 1 week. So either Jordan or I, or maybe both, could call the assessor again and say, do you have more certainty on this, or can you give us more certainty on when you're really going to certify? Because we need to establish a schedule really, and you are the drop dead point for us. So we need some. He can make that decision. It's whether or not he wants to make that decision, for us, and he may not want to. That's not my call. So I think the first thing to do would be to call the assessor and find out if we can get some more surety on that issue. And I think if we could move the city council meeting is now scheduled, the second one where the vote is scheduled for the 17th. We can move it to the 24th and still be okay, I believe, within by when he can legally do it. And I'll have to double check that. I'd like to move it to the 31st, which gets it done by the very last date of September, which should also be okay. But that may also, depending on what he says, that it may also be chancy.
Okay. Jason, thoughts?
Yeah, I'm just a little nervous about flirting with that deadline, and planning around a statement from the assessor given by phone, as though it's really fact, and counting on it being so. I'd rather, my preference would be to have all our ducks in a row before the first day that the assessor could certify them. That, and that's just a little food for thought in terms of how we consider our options here.
I think what I'll come prepared with for Wednesday night is a buffet of options of, I think the option we're really facing, or you all are facing as a board, is going to be move forward with the plan as is in time to freeze the tax base of January 2021 immediately after the fire for the maximum TIF that the board is willing to collect. Option 2 will likely be to still pass the ordinance before the end of the year, but would likely preclude freezing the January 2021 tax levels. I'm at a point where I would appreciate that extra time to be able to really do this justice and work with folks to develop that buffet, a plan that's more solid in terms of the outcomes we know we're going to want to make happen versus less solid plan, but more solid bank to work with, I think will be the ultimate choice that the board will be able to make. I'll do my best to show the different increments and levels and the impacts, and I will leave it to the board to decide on Wednesday.
Okay, I think that sounds really good. I'm just wondering if there were, just always looking at the little hybrid solution, that a couple of those things we could get in. If the board wanted to, would that be, Elaine, the things that you said you could manage?
I can manage the street before Wednesday.
Okay,
If given another week, and I will verify the first date the assessor can certify.
okay,
And
yeah, let's
we
have
know
that.
Exactly how much time we have.
That's
If it's
the,
a full week, then we could add in 1, 2, whatever it was, 4 of those areas, but they weren't numerical. We would have to figure out what to delete. But I think we can get that done if I have a week from Wednesday. If I get that direction Wednesday night and it has to be done the next Wednesday, I think we can do that. I know we can do that. I can commit to do that. But that
Okay.
is addressing the home ownership issue that Jordan just brought up.
that is not addressing the home ownership issue, you said?
Right, because you aren't taking in those other properties where there are single family homes that could be affordable for home ownership options, but presently aren't in the boundary and they're not in those other potential boundaries.
Yeah, and I have to say that, like Dave says, that's food for thought. It's kind of, difficult for me to understand if people are living there, and assuming they're not, they're paying their mortgage, they own their home, and they're not making major changes. Their property taxes aren't going up any more than the 3% a year. I'm just not quite sure how those people are at risk. So
They're mostly renters that are in those homes.
along Wagner Creek.
Oh, you're talking about displacement. So there's 3
Yeah.
different modes. There's the affordable housing, which is the marked out areas. There's the attainable housing, which is the home ownership programs. And then there's the displacement, the anti-displacement work.
Mhm.
So including houses along Wagner Creek would be just giving us that buffer to help with anti-displacement activities. What we would be missing in the hybrid model is being able to do the attainable housing, the home ownership programs for homes and talent that are at a more cost point that could be for home ownership purchase program.
Okay. Dave?
I guess what I'm wondering from what Elaine just said is the work, right, is if we talked about changing those little, maybe bringing those little tax lots. But if we wanted to bring in some of the ones that offered more, what did Jordan call it, attainable housing, I think, that's just a bigger adjustment of the boundary. But if Jordan were able to come in with proposals on how we might include some and what we might take out, and the board could settle on that on Wednesday, does that make Elaine's job a lot harder as opposed to just bringing in those 4 smaller ones? Or it's basically the same amount of work, just the boundary is different?
Any change over the road is the same amount of work. It's just the boundaries different.
Okay.
Everything changes.
Yeah, so if everything's going to change, right, then it seems to me we either just do the little road or we take a serious look at a couple options on how to make the change worth the effort. And of course, I'd be looking at Jordan to bring some of those options.
Yeah, I can't bring those options themselves by Wednesday. I can bring the timeline needed for different levels of options.
Okay.
But you promised us a buffet,
Right.
right?
Array of
So
timelines to choose from.
a buffet of timelines.
No.
Okay,
Yeah,
but they're
What 1 month will buy you, what 2 months will buy you, what 3
well,
months will buy you.
I guess, but the
Okay.
buffet, what I understood was the map that you showed us today with the properties you thought would be helpful to include, and the idea of widening Wagner to include the parcels along Wagner. So those were 2 things that are understood now that you could explain, that Elaine could incorporate within a week.
Yeah,
Is
but I
that-
think the challenge is
No?
if she brings those other parcels in, what parcels are we gonna take out?
Yeah, we would have to make those decisions on Wednesday.
Yeah, and my
Um,
understanding was not so much that the housing along Rat Creek, but the stuff that was more like the old downtown, up Main Street on Front and Second and First. I thought that's where the more attainable housing was, which is what I was thinking of, because it sounds like along Rat Creek, if I understood it right, the city on its own could implement some policies that, so that as the river there gets cleaned up.
Oh, I see.
maybe a
Yeah,
path,
you're right.
they could do that. So I was thinking of the affordable and the attainable options. But I can see, right, it's liable to open, and it probably will open a whole can of worms of, okay, well, that'd be great to put these in, but then what do we take
Right.
out? And what's
Right.
going to come out is where all the haggling is going to happen.
And if what comes out has value, assessed value, I mean, the land will have some, it's going to change your financial forecast.
Oh, and I guess those areas that need upgraded, that would change it too, because there is stuff there,
Right.
right? Yeah.
Okay, so it's going to be a fun meeting on Wednesday. And depending on what the board decides, there might be, well, we'll have to decide. We'll definitely be at a crossroads on Wednesday. And as far as what this subcommittee was supposed to accomplish, that was basically the spreadsheet,
Yes,
right? And we did that. So
we
check.
did that. I'm going to go over some of that with Jordan tomorrow and try to get you sent out something before Wednesday night so that you can take a look at it. Before
Okay.
just as I said, as the people who've been involved
And Jordan, is there a way to prevent a serial meeting? Is there a way for you to kind of queue this up in an email to the other board members who wouldn't have had the chance to listen to this meeting? Just to say what we're going to be talking about on Wednesday, or maybe, I think maybe what actually might be fine, since this was a public meeting, is to, I mean, I could do this, is just send an email to the rest of the board, say, go listen to the subcommittee meeting starting at this point. So you have a handle on what Wednesday night's going to be about.
Yeah, and we can absolutely do tomorrow morning. Yeah, so I'll work with Hector to get the video uploaded.
Okay.
So I found my notes from the assessor. He says that they have to stop data entry on September 25th, which means he could certify the tax roll on September 26th. So I will verify that from my notes just to make sure that's exactly, there's got to be Oregon administrative rules that provide him that information, and then work backwards from whatever that date is to see how much time we have. Yeah.
Okay, that would be great, Elaine. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for being such great sports on this and hanging out for another extra 45 minutes. And I'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Thanks all.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Lane.
Yep.